Come inside and join me as we dissolve the boundaries of sound and fiction.
Hello again, and welcome back to These Menacing Dreams. It's a new year, and an interesting time to be alive. But today, we go back to a simpler era, a time less remembered. A father of two, living in a quaint Vermont town, notices an influx of strange outsiders whose behavior is ahead of their time. Enough rambling. Just relax and prepare yourself for episode 66 of These Menacing Dreams. POISONFACE. It had to be 2009, 2010 maybe, right before everyone always had a phone screen in front of their face. It was a better time back then, the pre-internet days. More simple in my opinion. You could actually talk to people without the rest of the world being there, sort of looking over your shoulder, observing you unconsciously. It was also autumn. I remember that because the air was cool, but it moved slowly, as if the world itself was preparing to hold its breath. Nothing was different about this particular day, but something was not right. I was downtown at Ace Hardware, picking up some paint. Since it was almost lunch, I thought I'd pop into a place and grab a sandwich to go. I was walking down the street when I noticed it. Not obvious at first, but pretty odd once I caught a glance. Outside this one cafe was a group of kids, early 20s I'd say, all sitting around a table and looking at their phones. I know this doesn't sound strange, but it was a long time ago. Back then, when a group of people were looking at something, they'd be looking together. Someone would find a picture or video to show their friends, and everyone would gather around one device. The internet was young, so it was more of a shared experience. But this group of kids were all looking at their screens separately. Not talking, not moving, just staring. Silently. Together. Something about it just really unsettled me. About a month later, I saw it again. This time with a different group of young people at another spot downtown. The same thing. Just sitting around, phones in hand, screen in face, absolutely plugged. I went into the cafe right by them to grab a bite. The owner, Greg, a friend of mine, was there. So I asked him, "Hey man, what's going on with these kids out here? You seen them? They just sit around staring at their phones." Greg said there had recently been an influx of kids from Keene State. Apparently a bunch of them dropped out and were looking for work here in Brattleboro. A lot of the local businesses had been receiving applications from this random wave of young people looking to settle here. Brattleboro's small-town charm had always attracted outsiders, but never groups of college-age kids like this. I tried to brush it off as one of those weird things that happen sometimes, but I couldn't. For some reason, I just couldn't. In the following months, I started seeing these kids regularly around town, usually working, sometimes at a restaurant over here or a bar over there. It was strange because for kids in their early 20s, they seemed to have no energy. I mean, it's not like you have to be all chipper just because you're young, but you'd expect people this age not to act like senior citizens. I started to suspect that they were all on drugs, probably why they flunked out of school and were bound to the area. It made perfect sense, but still, something told me that wasn't really the case either. Winter rolled around and people naturally went into hiding. Everyone avoided the cold as they did every year, and more time was spent indoors. I pretty much forgot about the college kids hanging around town and spent more time with my own family. I loved the holidays. The perfect excuse to stay inside, eat tons of food, drink a lot, and not work. I only had a few interior jobs this particular year, So it was great. I could be at home with my wife and the boys most days, no worries. However, a subtle reminder of things going on in town did hit me one night, and put a bit of a damper on the holidays. We were out at dinner, my family and the Merritts, who also have 2 boys in middle school. We've been close ever since the kids were babies, so an early holiday dinner is sort of our tradition. For some reason, we opted to go to a restaurant this year. Not sure why, but this Italian place in town never disappointed, so we went there. I remember being pissed off because I had made a reservation like 2 weeks in advance, but they still managed to give us the worst table they had. It was one right in the back, kind of right by the kitchen entrance and the bathrooms, except there were 8 of us, and they stuck another table on the end, so you could really see what was going on back there. The wives weren't happy about it either, but the place was packed, so we couldn't move. To mitigate the issue, me and Jim sat by the kitchen. Everything else was fine. The food was good, and we chit-chatted all night over drinks. Throughout the evening, I couldn't help but peep into the kitchen and observe what was going on behind the scenes. I recognized someone back there, the dishwasher. He was one of the kids I had seen on the street before. I didn't notice at first, but when he took out his phone and started looking at it by the dish rack, it clicked. All night he would periodically take the phone out and look at it, pretty much every chance he got, even if only for a few seconds. When things got busy in the restaurant and the dishes really started piling up, one of the waiters got a bit chippy with him. He said, "Hey, put that fucking phone away and get us some dishes. We're running out. And the kitchen's out of saucepans too." He agreed dismissively, but it didn't change how often he looked at his phone. Again, whenever he got the chance, the phone came out and he just stared at it. At one point, the kid probably thought that he had more time than he actually did and got caught looking again. This time, a different waitress came up and said, "Are you serious, dude? Put that thing away and clean some dishes. We're out right now." He apologized repeatedly before looking over at the massive pile with shock, as if blindsided by his own neglect. He worked double time to try and catch up, hustling desperately to appease the waitstaff and kitchen. Unfortunately, it was too late. The dishes had gotten away from him, and there was no recovering. Line cooks were coming into the dish room to scold him, even washing certain items themselves to get them right away. The boy kept his head down and worked. He didn't take his phone out at all, but I could tell he wanted to. Once the heat was off him a bit, no one came back there to get anything. The dish pile was high, but now the kid could relax. He reached into his pocket for the phone. Big mistake, I thought to myself. He stared at it for a few minutes, until suddenly the first waiter came back in and blew his top at the boy. "What the fuck are you doing, man? Can't you see how much shit you need to wash? What is so important that you need to look at that thing all the time?" The kid stood frozen, with no answer to the angry waiter's questions. "No, seriously, what are you looking at?" He reached for the phone, as the kid quickly retracted and shoved it back into his pocket. The frightening exchange was audible from the dining room, as customers settled down to hear what was happening. "Show me what you're looking at, or just go home now." "No," the boy said meekly. "All right, fine, get out of here then. I'm gonna do these dishes." The waiter took the kid's apron and got to work on the dishes. The boy sulked slowly out the back door, reaching into his pocket while he left. None of the customers paid much mind to the interaction because they couldn't see what was going on. As soon as it was over, people went back to talking and eating dinner like nothing happened. I did too, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Even days after the incident happened, I couldn't get it out of my head, how entranced this kid was by what he was looking at, how he instinctively reached into his pocket when no one was around, how it was like second nature to steal a glance at every conceivable opportunity. What was he looking at on there? What could captivate someone to devote every free moment they had to it? I was confused, but more than that, I was worried. The holidays went by and the new year came in. I remember that everyone was excited about the new iPhone, what it could do, what that meant for people going forward. I didn't really care. Even back then, I was too old to be concerned with social media and using my phone for anything besides talking to people. But I understood this could be something for younger people, and I was alright with that. The weather got warmer and people started coming outside again. The boys were excited about summer vacation, and so was I, until I started seeing those kids from Keene State hanging around again. They were all around town, looking at their phones and having that same senior citizen energy from before. Only there were more of them now. Naturally, people talked and speculated about what their deal was. We were all curious, but not really urgent to learn everything about them because they were quite placid. They didn't bother anyone, so why bother them, seemed to be the attitude. I didn't really understand everyone's passiveness, but I didn't do anything about it either, so who could I blame? The one thing everyone seemed to agree on was that these kids were very secretive about what they were looking at. Anyone who came near was avoided by them, or the phone was put out of view when others were within eyeshot. I experienced this firsthand one day at the supermarket. I was with my boys at the grocery store, getting some things for a barbecue we were going to have that weekend. In the line at checkout, a young woman stood in front of us, with just a few items for herself. She had her phone out, and she was fixated at the screen, without distraction. I'm not normally a nosy person, but when I saw that she wasn't texting someone or reading anything, I took a closer look. To my surprise, she was looking at an image, a scary one. It appeared to be the face of a person. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, but it was ghoulish and haunting. The expression on its face was unidentifiable. Not happy, not sad, something involving both, yet vacant and inhuman altogether. I couldn't tell if it was a hyper-realistic painting or a photograph from where I was standing. It looked real, but proportions and positioning of the eyes, nose, and mouth would suggest otherwise. It also looked wet, but not from water. I soon found myself entranced by the image, kind of zoning out as I looked at it from over her shoulder. She must have sensed my presence coming from right behind her, because she abruptly snapped out of her trance and looked back at me while hiding her phone. I flinched from the shock and apologized as if I had made some kind of mistake by accident. But what I was doing clearly wasn't an accident, and she knew that. Instead of saying something, she just looked at me with her big, sad eyes, as if she was betrayed by a close friend. I had no idea what else to say or do, so I just stood there, silently. She put down her basket, got out of line, and left the store. Luckily, the boys were too busy playing with the cart to see what was going on, but that didn't stop others from taking notice and wondering what just happened. Those who watched her walk away probably thought I was some old creep getting a little too familiar, but if they got a look at what I saw, I'm sure they'd be too confused to judge. In the time following, I couldn't get that image out of my head. Even though I only got a moment's glance, it stuck with me heavily. All summer I'd see these kids, hanging around Main Street, in the parks, at their jobs, looking quietly at their phones, their emotionless glare seeming more sinister now that I knew what was on their screens. On top of that, there appeared to be more of these strange outsiders funneling into town, and some of them weren't that young. With the end of summer nearing, my boys prepared to go back to school, with my eldest entering high school. It was a big step for Braden, one he was excited to take, but one the whole family seemed to put a lot of emphasis on for some reason. In anticipation of his jump to 9th grade, Braden's aunt got him a new iPhone for his birthday. He was absolutely ecstatic. My wife was surprised. His brother was jealous, but I was terrified. I almost wanted to say he couldn't have it yet, that he'd have to give it back for a couple years because he didn't need something so expensive, but that would potentially create more problems than it would solve. I must have been pretty telling with my emotions because Braden looked at me while he held his new extremely generous gift, as if seeking my approval, his eyes asking, "Is this okay?" I just smiled and nodded. To ease everyone's tension, I said something to the effect of, "You owe Auntie Jenny a lot of car washes now." Everyone chuckled, and I think I did too. The prospect of what that phone could do to my son worried me. I didn't care about anything else besides that one thing. turning into one of those kids on Main Street. I hadn't heard about any local people getting sucked into their phones by some uncanny image, so I figured it was an isolated event and hoped it would stay that way. Weeks went by without incident, and Braden wasn't on his phone too much. I set up some rules for him, like no phone past 8 p.m., no social media like Instagram or Facebook. He was good about the rules. I never had to remind him, so I didn't worry. Then one day, while painting a client's house, all that changed. Terry O'Shea, who I'd known since I was 12, needed his tool shed repainted. He did this every 5 years or so. It was a quick and relatively easy job, one I could do in 2 to 3 days. Terry also had a son in high school, a few years older than mine, but technically they were classmates. The first day I was out there painting, Terry's son was mowing the lawn. They sat on a few acres, so he drove a riding mower up and down the lengthy yard. I couldn't help but notice him periodically taking breaks to drink water and look at his phone. It wasn't that hot outside, so I suspected it was the phone he was so keen on. Terry came out to say hi, and I brought it up to him. "Hey, your kid seems to be pretty occupied by that phone. He running a business or something?" Terry just laughed and said he didn't know. Ever since he got that new fancy phone, he's just been looking at it all the time. "What does he look at on there?" I asked. "It's weird," he said. "He looks at art, I think. I don't know. They're weird pictures of ghosts or something." My stomach began to open, and that feeling of dread started creeping up through my body. "Hey, that's what all those weird kids in town are always looking at on their phones. Some kind of strange ghost pictures. They're obsessed." Terry just laughed it off and said it must be a phase. He didn't seem bothered by it at all, which I thought was odd. "Yeah, just a phase," I replied, and continued painting the shed. Back at home, my nervousness toward my son's phone use was amplified by 100 times. Whenever he was on it, I stared at him, wondering intensely about what he was looking at. I dare not encroach on his privacy and pry too much about what was on there. Braden and I had a great relationship, and I wanted to keep it that way. I searched the internet looking for anything that described happenings like that of our small town. Articles or testimonials talking about phone-obsessed drifters gravitating to a new place. I found absolutely nothing. On all the message boards and websites I visited, I didn't find a single thing which discussed events like ours. I had a hard time believing there weren't others out there who knew about this phenomenon, so, in an act of desperation, I approached Terry's son. The next day, painting the shed, I spotted Terry's son on their back porch, sitting in a chair with phone in hand. I stopped everything I was doing and walked over to him, calmly, as not to freak him out. I said, "Hey, bud, is that the new iPhone?" He said yes, timidly. I told him about how my son just got one for his birthday and how much he loved it. "Yeah, Braden can't get enough of that thing." "Hey, what are you looking at on there?" He immediately hid the phone from view and said, "Nothing really." I asked about odd images people might be sharing, some weird ghoul pictures the kids are all obsessed with. He claimed to not know what I was talking about, and then quickly made some vague excuse to leave. I could tell how uncomfortable he was by my line of questioning, and I felt bad about scaring him off. But I was desperate to know. How else could I understand? Later on, I asked Braden about Terry's kid, if he knew him or not. Braden said he did, that they weren't friends, but a lot of people knew him. I asked about the phone. Why was he always looking at it? Braden didn't know, but a few of the upperclassmen were known for always looking at their phones. Not just a little bit, but all the time. He said it was weird and a bit creepy how they always had their phones out, like they took up space, but they weren't actually there. Almost every day I asked my son about the kids at school who couldn't stop looking at their screens. I could tell it was starting to get on his nerves. No matter how many times I asked, Braden kept with his statement about not knowing what they looked at all the time. I sort of believed him because Braden wasn't glued to his phone screen that much, at least not as much as the others, but I had a sneaking suspicion that he knew more than he told me. Kids always have a way of keeping things from their parents. If there's something we're not meant to know, we hardly ever get it from them. Soon enough, my paranoid suspicions were confirmed. One weekend, we drove up to Burlington for a soccer tournament. Jesse, my youngest, was playing with the travel team, and we had decided to spend the weekend up there as a little family getaway. On the way up, I saw my boys glued to Braden's phone in the rearview mirror. Before I could ask what was so interesting, I heard Jesse say, "She looks scary." "What looks scary, bud?" I interjected quickly. "This lady." Braden punched his brother's thigh fast and hard. "Ow! Hey, what's wrong with you? Don't hit your brother like that." Braden apologized, but I was too flustered by what was going on to stay angry at him. All I knew was that Braden and I had to have a serious talk as soon as we arrived in Burlington. During Jesse's first match, I pulled Braden aside and asked him about his phone. "Braden, I'm not mad at you, but I need to know what's on your phone. What were you showing your brother?" He was scared, hesitant to speak, so I said, "Look, you're not going to get in trouble if you just tell me the truth and show me what's on there." He reluctantly pulled out the phone and unlocked it before handing it over. "Where is it?" I said. "Go to pictures," he replied. "The first one." In his photo album was a ghoulish image of a person, or something like a person, similar to the one I saw at the grocery store. This one was different, but it had all the same qualities: horrifying appearance, unidentifiable expression, wet, mucousy skin. Again, I couldn't tell if it was a photograph or not. Gazing at it momentarily brought me out of the situation. Time felt slow, but I snapped out of it. "Why do you have this, Braden?" "I don't know," he said. "Where did you get it?" "My friend at school sent it to me. It's some weird thing from the internet." My next question was the most important. "Braden, do you feel the need to look at this all the time?" "No," he replied. I believed him. Braden went on to explain that some kids at school had been sharing this image along with a few others. Everyone referred to it as a haunted picture that could grab your soul. The thing is, it only worked on certain people, and apparently, it was working on a few of the older kids at school. Pretty much all of the younger kids saw or possessed this image at some point, but found it creepy, so just got rid of it. But a small group of upperclassmen, including Terry's son, had become infatuated with it and looked at the image non-stop. These freakish pictures had a name. It was POISONFACE. As soon as we got home on Sunday, I went straight to the computer to do some research. I looked up POISONFACE, but didn't get the results I needed. Something came up about a band, something else about a skin condition, but after hours and hours of digging, I finally got what I was looking for. An obscure forum called wasteexchange.com, full of people sharing images and videos of all kinds. Judging by the most recent posts, POISONFACE was getting shared and discussed a lot. People were on here asking for images and posting new ones they found, talking briefly about the pull they felt from these images and how it made them want more. I wondered how many of these active users were those new kids hanging around town. The POISONFACE pictures I saw on this site were like the ones I saw at the grocery store and on my son's phone. On the forum were also some fakes, copycats which stood out from the real ones. It was obvious they were different because there was no feeling you got from them. They were just like any other image, but the real ones had a quality that's almost impossible to describe, like a need to stare deeper into the subject because it wants you there. After a while, I could feel the pull that many on the website were talking about. It was intoxicating. I stayed focused though, and kept learning more. A few posts on the site claimed the genuine POISONFACE images came from one source, one person, someone called the Maker. No one could identify who this person was or how they made these images, but it was clear that they possessed a power that could infect minds. Some users even warned others to tread carefully when engaging with POISONFACE. I checked the forum every day, trying to figure out where the pictures originated from and what they even were, but the whole thing just continued to be one giant mystery. The holidays rolled around again, and people went back into hiding from the cold. Time was spent with family, and I tried my best to forget about this whole poison face thing. Braden didn't spend all of his time staring at the phone, so I felt relatively confident that he was safe. I just hoped that it would stay that way. Nearing Christmas, we went back to that Italian restaurant with the Merritts for our holiday dinner. It was busy there again, but we got a much better table this time. At one point, I got up to go to the bathroom and poked my head into the kitchen. The dishwasher was an older South American man. He worked quickly and efficiently. All the dishes were clean. When spring came around and the weather started warming up, people began coming back outside, including those kids from Keene State. Still, they gazed at their phone screens with a deadpan stare, an unbroken concentration. However, there were fewer of them this year, far fewer, and as time went on, even more disappeared. I went back onto wasteexchange.com because I hadn't been in months, and to my surprise, the poison face images were disappearing as well. Users had been going back through the threads and deleting their posts before deleting their accounts. A few images still existed, but most had been scrubbed, with more and more being taken down every day. I found it odd, this coordinated effort to erase Poison Face from the web and cover its digital tracks. But then again, I saw how it was affecting people and assumed it for the best. It seemed like this whole Poison Face thing was finally coming to an end. But just when I thought it was over, though, things took another weird turn. With the herd of screen-addicted drifters thinning out, I figured they were simply moving on. What I didn't realize was that they were taking a piece of this town with them. A few of the kids at Braden's high school who had been pulled in by Poison Face had suddenly stopped attending school, even though they were on track to graduate that year. They even up and told their parents that they were moving out and leaving town. One of these kids was Terry's son, who ran away in the middle of the night after Terry told him that moving out wasn't an option. It was kind of a big deal. Terry's kid was a really good student, and he was set to go to UVM the following year with scholarships and everything. Terry was a wreck after it happened and said he was totally blindsided by his son's reckless decision. I didn't say anything when we spoke about it, but I knew this had something to do with Poison Face. In time, things returned back to normal for our sleepy little town. Everyone forgot about the influx of weird kids now that they were gone, and even Terry got his life back after a while. He still didn't know where his son was, although he received emails from him every once in a while. I haven't spoken with Terry in a really long time, but last I heard, he believes his son is somewhere out west. It's been 15 years now. Terry's never had his shed repainted. New Year's just passed, and it's 2026. Crazy how time flies. The world has been moving pretty fast too. Things are way different now than they were all those years ago. I remember how haunting it was to see a group of people all staring at their phones individually back then. Now, I see it all the time, everywhere I go. I know people say it's social media, streaming apps, and all this new stuff that's got everyone hooked. But not me. I don't see it like that at all. Because for me, I see a little bit of Poison Face everywhere I look, and it's only getting stronger. Thank you kindly for tuning in and getting through the whole story. If you want to support this show, please share it with fellow lovers of dark fiction, or leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, take care, and be ready to explore these menacing dreams.